Hello, Workplace Math 10 students. Today we're going to be looking at bar graphs again. This time we're going to be looking at bar graphs that indicate bills. So bills you would normally see like utilities bills and things like that. So let's just take a look at what this looks like. So the first thing that I just want to show you is what the assignment's going to be called, which is G4, bar graphs, and the Mathletics assignment that is tied to this is called graphs from bills. So let's take a look at what this some questions here. So the first thing that we'll look at is just a reminder that we are going to be looking at in this unit line graphs, which we already looked at. This is the second part of the bar graphs that we're going to be looking at today. And then we'll also look at pie graphs in subsequent lessons, and then pictographs as well as histograms. So just a reminder of what a bar graph is. A bar graph, as the name would suggest, looks kind of like a vertical bar, and it usually delineates categories of information. In this case, 4 different people's, how many videos they own. In this case here as well, we are going to be seeing that another type of bar graph could be comparing bills. And when you get something like BC Hydro or BC Gas, any sort of utility bill, you will oftentimes see this type of stuff where it shows you how much you've used and it compares it to the last bill, compares it to the same time last year. So we're going to look at how we can evaluate that and understand that. So let's take a look at an example from the Mathletics assignment. So this is an example of a question here, and what we see here is we see that it's telling us that the average daily usage of, in this case, energy, so this is electricity, so this would be like a hydro bill, and it's measured in kilowatts. And so it's telling us that on this bill that we use 39 kilowatts, that last bill we used 51 kilowatts, and that last year at the same time, same period, so let's say the month is May, so this would have been May of 2019 as compared to May of 2020, that we only use 15,000 kilowatts. It also is telling us here that the greenhouse gases emitted to produce the energy used in this bill, so that this bill here is 39 kilowatts, was 39.7 kilograms. So in essence, it's almost 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide that is produced for every kilowatt you use. Now the first question here says, has there been an increase or a decrease from the last year to this bill? So looking at last year, comparing last year to this year. So we're going from last year to this year. Did the amount of usage increase from this time to this time? Well, the answer is yes, because obviously 39 is greater than 15. So the answer to this would be an increase. That's probably not too hard to see. Now, the other part of this becomes a little bit more tricky. So what we're seeing here is it now asks in part B, it says calculate the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, emitted to produce the energy for the last year. So last year was once again 15 kilowatts. Okay. Now, what it's telling us here in this thing here is that based on this bill, which is the 39 kilowatts, that there was 39.7 kilograms of carbon dioxide produced. So if we were wanting to figure out what the amount of kilograms of carbon dioxide that are produced are, it would be 39.7 kilograms, is what we're told, for the amount of usage that we had for this bill, which was 39 kilowatts. So what we're seeing here is if we plug this into our calculator, we're going to get a number that you're going to see is pretty much 1. So 39.7 divided by 39 is going to be pretty close to 1. So I'm just going to put an approximate sign, and then we'll use the calculator exactly. But it would basically be about 1 kilogram for every kilowatt. Now, what we want to know is we want to know how many kilograms it will be for the period last year. So right now, that's 15 kilowatts. So we're going to take the 1 kilogram, and we're going to multiply it by the 15 kilowatts that we have there. And not surprisingly, it's going to come out with a number that is approximately 15. So let's just take a look at what that looks like when we use a calculator, though. So I'll just stop share here and go to my calculator. So if I were to put this into my calculator, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 39.7 kilograms that we get in carbon dioxide, and I divide that by the number of kilowatts we use, which was exactly 39. This is going to give us a number that is very close to 1.017. It's not 1 though, so we do need to do this conversion. And then we're going to multiply that by the number of kilowatts we used in that last year period that we want to look for. So that's 15. So when we look at this, it's 15.27 approximately, but it's asking us to the nearest whole kilogram. So the answer here would be 15. So if I go back here now to my question, you can see that's why that this answer 15 is the correct answer here. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So let's take a look at another type of question you will see in this. So this is the average daily usage. And in this case, it is basically the average daily usage of water. So this is basically, you may know that we have water meters now in Kamloops. And so it is tracking how much you use, not only for each billing period, but also it compares it to how much you used the previous year. And so in this particular case, the first question is, it says, has there been an increase or a decrease from last year to this bill? So basically we were comparing last year's bill to this bill. And the question is, did it go up? Well, obviously it did, because 2,110 is less than the 2,271. So basically it increased from 2,110 to 2,271. And that's why we would say it increased from last year's bill to this bill. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the next part of this is a little bit more tricky. It says calculate the percentage convert in usage for this bill as a percentage of last year. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the difference between these two. So what we have to do here is we have to take 2,271, so that's the number of liters from this bill, subtract off the amount that we had last year, and so we're going to get, as the difference there, we're going to get 161. And we'll do them in the calculator in a second, but you can see that. And then that 161 we got, what we want to do is we want to divide that by, and it's saying as a percentage of last year. So it's whatever it's showing here, we want to compare that to last year's numbers. So that's why we have to divide by the last year value. And that's going to give us a decimal value, which, remember, when we get that decimal value, we'll have to multiply by 100 to find out what the percentage is. So let's plug that into the calculator so we can see exactly how that works. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the difference between the two numbers. So that was 2,271 was this bill's amount minus the 2,110, which was last year's amount. So the difference was 161. Now we're going to divide this, and the question was as a percentage of last year. So we're going to divide this by the value of last year. So that was 2,110. So we're going to get this figure here. And this is a decimal value, but to convert to percentage, we just simply need to multiply by 100. So this is going to tell us then that this is 7.63%. Now we only have to have one decimal, so that's going to be 7.6%. And so if I click back here now and take a look, that is why the value 7.6% is correct. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So let's take a look at another example. So this is another one where we have energy that we're comparing this time. And so once again here, we are comparing from last year's bill. So we want to know from last year's bill to this bill. And we want to know whether it increased or decreased. Well, last year's bill was 95 and this year's bill is only 17. So this is clearly a very large decrease. Okay. Now, the other thing we have to look at here is that it's asking us now to calculate the kilograms of carbon dioxide emitted. So if you recall, this number 17.5 kilograms is comparing how many kilograms was produced when we burned off 17 kilowatts of energy. So once again, to figure this out, it's 17.5 divided by the 17. Now this is going to give us a number that is fairly close to 1, but it is a little bit more than 1, so approximately 1. And then we're going to have to multiply that by the last year amount, which is 95. And so what we're going to end up with is not a number that's 95 because it's approximately 1. It's going to be a bit bigger than that. So let's take a look at how that looks in the calculator. So I'm just going to click here and go to my calculator. That's just my the buzzer for my dryer going off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 17.5, which is the number of kilograms that are produced by burning that 17 kilowatts. So I'm going to take 17.5 and I'm going to divide it by 17. That is going to give me a number that's very close to 1, but it's not exactly 1. So now when I multiply this by the number of kilowatts I used last year, which was 95, notice that I don't get exactly 95 here. I get 97.79, which when rounded up to a whole number is 98. And that's why when we come back here, we should see the value is 98 kilograms. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Let's take a look at one last example. So this one is a water usage again. So once again here, it's asking us to compare from last bill to this bill. So once again, now we're looking at last bill and we're saying, hey, from last bill to this bill, did it increase or decrease? Well, it went from 737 and it went down to 718. So we are decreasing slightly, not much, but slightly. Now it's asking us to figure out the percentage difference here really. So now what we need to do is we need to go 737 and subtract from that the 718. And I wrote that really large, so I have to put the number below. But basically the difference between these two would be 19. So that 19, we're going to then divide by, and we're comparing this to the last bill. So the last bill number is 737. So I'm going to divide by 737, and that's going to then produce a small decimal value that I'm going to multiply by 100 to figure out the percentage value. So let's take a look at how we plug that into our calculator. So I'm going to firstly figure out the difference between 737, which was last year's last bill, minus the new bill's amount, which was 718. So the difference is 19 that we said before. We're going to then divide by not this bill's amount, but last bill, because we're comparing to the last bill. So we're going to divide by 737. This is going to give me a very small decimal value, but then to convert this to a percentage, I need to multiply by 100. And so this is going to be 2.57, which rounded to one decimal would be 2.6%. And so that's why when I come back in here, why this 2.6 value is correct. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Thanks for watching. And once again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to